Welcome to the Disruptive Voices of the Pacific, where for the last month I have been introducing you, although they don't need an introduction, but I've been introducing you to a bunch of the contributors to this book, Sex, Dating and Relationships, because this has not been my work. It's been the work of 25 amazing local Fijians, although some aren't so local anymore. Some have moved overseas, but it's been an amazing team effort, and it's just my joy for me to be able to interview them, hear a little bit more about their background, their journeys, and why they're passionate about seeing this book get into the hands of thousands of teenagers. So I want to welcome Libby and Anne. They do speak, but they're waving for now. Hey, we are in 3 different countries. So I'm in Australia. Libby is in Fiji. And Anne, where are you?
I'm in England.
In England, but you're actually living in Scotland, but just visiting family in England.
We're visiting in England.
Yes. So look, Anne, both of them don't need introduction, but Anne, former online safety commissioner for Fiji, Miss Hibiscus, a mother. Now she runs her own organisation, around online safety, still working in that space, which is so important. And Libby as well, an amazing creative woman, a mother, a pastor. And these are just great women. So I'm so pleased to have them. Now, and you've done a chapter on this online safety. Really comes out of your expertise and your years in this area. Libby, you've got a podcast, because every chapter has podcasts at the end for people who hate reading. You can just go and listen to the podcast, which is great because we all learn in different ways. But Anne, let's just first talk about your chapter. You start off with quite a confronting story of a young woman who was what you term the word catfished by an older man and lured to somewhere on the other side of Fiji. That was a true story, right?
It was a true story, and it's crazy how I don't want to say normal, but it's crazy how inundated our streets are back home with these types of stories. And so it's real simple, and it's easy to sort of gauge what was happening for the first couple of weeks or months that this young woman was online. And catfishing is not something, it's not new anymore. It's something like they have TV shows about it now. You can go on YouTube and watch entire catfishing shows about it. And it's unfortunate that it's also hit us. It's also hit Fiji. And that wasn't the first time that I heard that story of a young girl being catfished. But I think as I spent more time at the commission, it became older women who were being catfished. And so there's a bit of a range of who is likely to be catfished, or who is likely to be perpetrating it as well, because people have different motives. And it, unfortunately, it's always surprising to me, at least.
Yeah. For parents or grandparents who are watching this thinking, what the heck is a catfish? Maybe just explain to us, it's more than something that's in the ocean.
Yeah. So catfishing is really if someone is pretending to be someone else online to be able to lure you into a romantic relationship, a financial one. And usually it will take place where you could even be talking, like you could get on a FaceTime or a messenger call, and you might think that you're having a conversation with somebody that says, oh, I'm 28, I'm 48, whatever the age may be, and I love you and I want to be with you, but you'll never see their face. Or if you do, it's probably the face of someone else. And so you're being tricked, basically. So catfishing is, no, it's not, it doesn't live in the ocean, but it does live in our digital oceans, if you look at it that way. And you can be catfished anywhere at any time, in the sense of the platforms that you engage in.
No, it's quite alarming. And especially, I find that they're really targeting, well, I mean, it can be all ages, but generally vulnerable girls.
Yes.
Um, Girls who are maybe just not getting on well with their parents, and they're easy bait, aren't they? Because finally somebody's showing them a bit of interest, and they
Yeah.
think this guy is 16, not 57. So they take the bait, hook, line, and sinker, and before you know it, meeting up with him, which is really dangerous. Tell us a bit
Mm.
about what is an average perpetrator like? Is there kind of,
I don't know if there's an average persona per se, but they're they are perpetrators. And sometimes they could even be people that we know, in the sense that they're just looking to lure, they're looking to do something that they find. I almost want to say it might be an adrenaline. I've never interviewed a perpetrator to sort of gauge their minds, but I have read a lot of things that have mentioned it is usually, especially in countries like Fiji, where everyone knows each other in that sense and everyone's a bit familiar, it can often be someone who at least knows one person connected to you. So it can be like your uncle's co-worker's grandfather, I don't know, something like that. But it's just like they're one off of you personally, because in order for them to connect with you, you'll see some type of mutual connection. You'll
yeah,
see a friend of a friend, or if you're a gamer and you see them online, you'll see them as somebody that's played with somebody else that you're familiar with, or you might recognize their names, or you might recognize their school. And so that's often like the story that I talk about in the book. It came off of the scenario because she knew the school, she recognized the school, she recognized the uniform, and yeah, I would really encourage you to read that book to find out what sort of evolves, because it wasn't something. I want to say that catfishing is not something that takes place overnight. It's very
mm,
steady. It's very, you make a connection, they'll try to make sure that they keep that connection, communication, they'll try to keep
build trust.
messaging, they
Mm,
keep you engaged, and it can be real subtle. It
mm,
can often start out as a friendship. You might even think, oh, this is someone that I can share my day with, who asks about familiar people, familiar places. And so it becomes this voice that you are excited to talk to during the day, and then it'll make this subtle shift into something that you don't even realize is evolving into something completely different, because then you're
yeah.
saying yes to something that you didn't even ever imagine saying yes to, and that's when it's, yeah, that's when it's dangerous.
Yeah. No, so thank you for your chapter has a lot of just great tips. I mean, our young people are
Yes.
living in an online world where they're
Yes.
even dating and doing all sorts of things. So we've got to help them navigate. So thank you for that. Libby, I think this current episode that we're doing is 120 something. So this, but back at episode 43, I interviewed you. And that's the episode we've put in the book on breaking free from porn and shame. That is probably one interview I've had much feedback from because, again, people don't think that women struggle with this, but the amount of Fijian women who have come up and shared their story to me because of you. So thank you for your voice. How was it for you after you came out sharing that? I mean, you're a pastor, you're leading all these people, and suddenly, the whole world knows about your porn struggle.
Um, I think for me, um, how do I I didn't realize how it would impact other people. I
Mm.
didn't realize how it would shape other people's view of me, or thoughts about me. I honestly didn't. I didn't give it much thought. I was just really, like, hey, I felt like it's something that needed to be shared and needed to be heard, so I just went for it. I didn't second think it or anything like that. I got a phone call, a message, a really long message from someone very close to me, and just, it really spoke, not in an encouraging way to me. And that's when I realized, wait, hang on, hold up. I did not realize that, there were people out there who felt I shouldn't have shared that or I shouldn't have talked about it, mainly because I was exposing myself, which meant I'm exposing my parents and I'm exposing my brothers and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, I feel like, or I believe that at the end of the day, I believe that if someone, all it takes is someone to start, and it's going to have a snowball effect. And the thing is, as long as something is in the dark, it'll keep growing. But when it comes into the light, that's when things will change. People are going to start asking questions. Oh, I didn't know. Or then something will happen to it. Something in the opposite direction for just growing kind of in the dark. So I guess to answer that question very directly, I didn't think much about how it would affect others or myself until I received comments afterwards, which I was not very emotionally attached to, so it didn't really affect me a whole lot.
Wow. Yes, that's why this is called the Disruptive Voices, because we are disrupting, and you did. But again, thank you for your courage and your vulnerability. Okay, so Anne and Libby, you're both grown women now. If you had read this book when you were 13, what's one piece of advice that might have helped you through life?
I think
You go first.
I think, well, there were two that stood out to me. One was one of the stories with pornography, speaking of pornography. And so because it was so subtle, the way that it happened, he was invited by a cousin, I think the story goes in the book. And so I think that lesson was very helpful for me to know, like, right, that it was other people have similar experiences in terms of how they're introduced into this space and with this world. And then the second would have been the really encouraging story of I think it's Melania, who shares her singleness story in that book. And so I think it would have just been really lovely at the age of 13 or 15 or 16 to know that it wasn't weird, it wasn't prude, it wasn't I don't know, like not the in thing, not to try to give it up. I guess like for language back then, it was like, oh, you're not going to give it up, or you're not going to, in terms of waiting until you're married or even dating somebody. And so I really appreciated those two stories and the lives that they, or the lessons that they've lived through. And being able to know that as a teenage girl, from another girl would have been really encouraging as a young woman, and then that of the story of Terry in the book was really encouraging as well, because it's familiar, and I recognized it not even of myself but of cousins and family members that I knew as well growing up. And so I was like, right, okay. So those were probably the two that I'm as I look back, I'm like, yeah, this would have been something that I would have liked to know back then as well. And for Terry's story, it's the one that keeps me going for my current circumstances, because I'm a mom of two boys. And so I'm like, oh, we're going to get it. And like the way you needs to pray in this here generation. But yeah, like Terry's story is it's in my mind, not only because I have sons, but because it's real subtle and I've experienced it, and I know others who have, in terms of the introduction to what good images and bad images. And I think the one thing that I'm grateful for now is that not only is there this resource in terms of keeping it real simple and letting you know that there are other resources available in terms of just having conversations with young kids about good images and bad images.
Yeah, great. Thanks. About you, Libby?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I would have loved to have known back when I was 13 is that it wasn't my fault. I read a lot of the stories in the book, um, and then you came into the section where you're asking the question, was I raped? And then all of the stories in there, and the truths in there, and so because of the type of childhood and my young adult life, um, the way that it was, that affected a lot of my marriage. And so I remember having a conversation with my husband at one point, and I think there were three of us or four of us in the room, and somebody said, "But Libby, it wasn't your fault." And I remember turning away from the conversation, and I just could not hold the tears back, because I didn't realize that for the longest time, the child in me longed to say that to me, that it wasn't your fault. And I realized that as I read the book, and as I looked at, were you raped, or it just brought me this kind of comfort and a sense of security, to now as an adult, because even as an adult, I have to intentionally um, remind myself, the things that I came through because of my childhood, and what I did in my young adult life, and how it's affecting my marriage, or how it started affecting my marriage, which thank God we are like, oh, so much better now. Yeah, I even now I continued to blame myself. Oh, the marriage is like this because of me. I'm this kind of mother because of me. And so I appreciated, and I wish somebody had told me, and I'd heard those words as a child. It's not your fault. Those words felt like a net beneath my feet that just caught me, and gave me, some sort of solid ground to stand on. Yeah, so for me, that would be one thing out of that book. Yeah.
Well, thank God you're hearing it now and not when you're 75. Um, what was going on in your life when you were 16 with boys, Libby?
When I was 16, that was when I had an official first, ask me out moment. It was on my 16th birthday. Yeah, it was when a guy, for the first time, I had that, experience of somebody asking me out and wanting to date me. It was sad because before any kind of relationship I experienced before that was all forced, and hidden and secretive. And here was a moment, that I wished with all of me that I could feel, um, how do I say this, feel pure about, but I couldn't, because deep inside me I knew, oh, I wish this was I wish this was the ideal scenario, where before this I don't know any other kind of relationship where this was the first pure kind of, and that I could journey with somebody who could teach me how to do this relationship. But it wasn't. It was something that was up on the front, and everything else was in the back. So for me, that's how that experience was. But that's what was going on in my life at 16. Yeah, which didn't last very long.
What happened? Did he break your heart?
Well, I think we went, that was during school holidays, so we went back to school, and a good friend of his, who was a girl, told him, oh, she's not, she's not good enough for you. But by this time, I had I had so detached myself emotionally from relationships, because of my past experience. Everything for me, relationship wise or any kind of sexual encounter, was very physical. I had learned to kind of shut my emotions and push it to the back, because I knew I'd get hurt, or I knew this was not going to be real. I knew this person would leave, which has, happened so many times growing up. So I was, when he came and said, "Oh, I can't be with you," I actually overheard the conversation that him and his best friend had, where she said, "Oh, she's not good enough for you." I overheard the conversation. So when he came to me, I had already built up my, yeah, whatever, bye, line, which very much was, upfront. But on the inside of me, I knew, like, okay, I've seen this before. This was bound to happen. And unbeknownst to me, it was a mindset that I had already established in me, that this was always going to happen to me. I would always meet people who would eventually leave me. So I never really emotionally attached myself to anybody. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Brutal, isn't it? Such a brutal time of life. So, and you're Fijian, but you grew up in America mostly. Didn't hence the accent, but you've lived in Fiji for the last however many years before moving. Maybe you're going to get a Scottish accent. Gee, you're going to be a mixture. What were you taught around sex, dating, and relationships growing up? Do you feel like it equipped you for your marriage?
Absolutely not. But I think in terms of that whole like aspect of like sex, dating, and relationships, I feel like I was taught the lesson of like, wait till you're married, don't have sex until you're married, don't have sex because you'll get pregnant. Like, I thought it was like something that you have sex once, you get pregnant, and that's your whole rest of the life, which, like that
Thought
could
you
be
well.
that could be people's lived experiences as well. But I didn't like it wasn't something that you did that was good. Like sex was always bad. Even if you saw it on screen, like I was introduced to pornography around that age or earlier, I think, as I look back. And so it was just like, so this is a bad thing. This is like, in terms of sex, it's bad. There's nothing good about it except that's how you get a kid. But even then, at a young age, like for some reason that was bad, like having a kid. And I look back at it now and I'm just like, that's such a distorted view of my like relationship with sex and what that word means to me. And so it was it's a very unique time because I was shaped by the environments that I was in, which was mostly around church and youth and all of that. So all of the conversations were always like, this is bad. And so it wasn't until like maybe my 20s and I was living in Fiji that I actually heard a sermon where like, sex is good. God gave sex. And I was like, no, he didn't. This pastor is lying. And I went back and I had to go and read Genesis and go and read my Bible, because I was like, I'm like, you can't say that from the pulpit. That's not right. And so yeah, it was a very distorted view. In terms of dating, I had never dated when I was in school. Like, did I like a boy? Yes. There was a term that I remember like we used in our teenage years, and it was cupcaking. And obviously that's a very like American thing, but it was cupcaking. And I never fully understood it either, but it was almost what Libby just described, in terms of like, you get in, but you don't get emotionally attached. Like, you just have this, I guess, physical attraction, physical relationship, but you're never emotionally like attached to this person. And so why the term is cupcaking, I have no idea. But that's a very strong term that's in my mind when it comes to relationships. When it comes to opposite sex relationships. And so it was really interesting. Dating, I did hear a bit about dating for marriage when I was in my older teenage years. I feel like the youth that I got involved in during my probably my last couple of years in America as well, there was almost this transition from like, all right, dating, you date to learn about someone, to learn about yourself, but you also, it's not a game. It's a tool to use as you transition from one season to another, but it's not a game. You don't play with people, which is very different from like the preteen years of just playing around and messing around with people.
Yeah.
I don't think I learned about the fullness of how it involves two people until I did get married, and that took a very different approach, because here were two people who grew up in two very different countries. Although I am Fijian, I did not grow up in Fiji, and my husband is Fijian through and through. And so these are two lives completely different. He comes from a huge family where marriage and dating and sex is depicted in a very different way from my immediate family, where it's just my brother and I, and then my mom and dad. And so they were like mixing these two people, these two cultures. I was like, Chad, only God. And so at this point, I'm like, to every young person, just wait if you can. But yeah, I learned it was a very different, it almost felt like a roller coaster when it comes to this specific area. And I'm still learning, married now almost
Yeah.
7 years, and I'm excited to celebrate that, but I'm definitely still learning.
Yeah. Yeah. I think we need to do a book on marriage too.
Definitely.
But yeah, I mean, all those comments on just, I mean, what you said, you were taught, don't have sex, and it's almost this fear. Seems like, and I've in the first chapter I write about it, just seems to be the common advice that's given out there, and that sends everyone into fear, which really does not help at all. And yeah, it was great to hear that you eventually got to a church that declared God's goodness for sex, but we've got a long way to go with that. And Libby, I had you come and speak at our Bella camp that we ran at BMS. That was early this year. Hey, you did a brilliant session on God's purpose for sex. A brilliant way of just depicting the beauty that sex is within marriage, but the destruction that it causes outside of marriage. And that comes from a bit of your own personal journey. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Sure. I think probably the one analogy I is always such a good reminder. It's easiest to picture is the sex is like fire, and fire can be beautiful, and fire can also be destructive. And the two pictures are, if you can imagine a house that's on fire. And the whole building is burning, people crying out, people dying, and that whole scenario. And so you can get a real feel of what it is to see a building go up in flames, and families are ruined and all of that. But you take the same element, that same fire, and you paint the picture on a beach where you have a nice little warm campfire going and a couple sitting side by side and just talking the evening through that fire. So the second image is God's design for sex, when it's within the boundaries of the person that God has put you together to marry, and it's within the boundaries of marriage, to be really direct. That's the image that sex can be. It's this beautiful bonfire by the beach watching the sunset, and you look at that picture and you're just like, oh. But when you explore, or when sex is outside of the boundaries of marriage, that's when it is like this building that's going up in flames, and you have people dying, families ruining. And for me, that's the strongest analogy that's always on the forefront of my mind of what sex is. And it's a beautiful thing, but it can also bring families and people to ruins if we don't know how the when, the boundary, of it. And when you think about, when you even if you think in more detail about that, and you think about the fire itself, like there's a way to start a fire. There are elements that must be present so the fire is contained, or the fire is blowing up a building. And so you've got to have all of those elements in play to be able to see that bonfire by the beach or the house going up in flames. But that's, for me, as a strong analogy of sex, what it is and what it isn't. That I hope a lot of young girls can capture and can keep, because it'll just help them answer the question, if they could stop for a minute to ask themselves, do I want to set a building on fire, or do I want to wait and wait for a campfire by the beach, like a bonfire? Yeah.
Sounds so simple. And again, we've got a great chapter on, God's purpose, because we haven't talked, just scared everyone into that sex is bad and evil before marriage. But why the fire more beautiful when it's in boundaries and contained? Hey, so no, keep painting that picture, not just for our girls, but for our boys too. Look, our time is almost up. Any last reflections or thoughts on this book, or comments that you want to make before I have to let you both go? Anything from you, Anne?
I will say, please go get the book. Especially if you have teenagers or if you're around teenagers. I think for me, it's a resource that it's not an answer to everything about sex, dating, relationships, and everything in between, but it is a conversation starter. And that's, I think, my biggest thing around this topic is the conversation needs to start, if it hasn't already. And if it is, then it needs to keep going, because there are, I think I heard it in one of the other podcast episodes where it was like, this is a generation that's seeking answers, and they're gonna lean to whichever direction. Like, I, for one, I'm very adamant about the fact that if I didn't meet the person that I met who introduced me to a relationship with Jesus when I was 19, I don't think I would have the relationship that I do with God now, because of the way that she met me and the how that she walked it out. But it started with a conversation, and this book is that. It introduces you to topics that you may not even be aware of, or some that you may be very familiar with, and even our own stories. And so, like I said, I read Terry's book, portion, or Terry's story, and immediately connected, because I was like, your family member is the very person that introduced you to this world. And so for me, my only sentiments, or my last sentiments, would be, please get the book and reach out to Letitia to learn how, or donate, or follow the Hatama Ride, and get connected, because it's a resource that starts the conversation, if it hasn't already.
Yeah, so good. I think for me, probably a closing thing for me would be just something that I hope that, like Anne is saying, just echoing what Anne is saying, I hope that we start having these conversations earlier, more honestly, and with more grace, so that we're not just trying to survive, but we're truly living. And I say that to say this: when you read this resource, when you read this book, which is the effect that it had on me, it tells me, or it confirms to me, that I'm not, because of my past, I'm not disqualified from true love or purity or purpose. Whether I've grown up with silence or shame or struggle, there is healing, there is truth, there's a community of people that are willing, ready to journey with me and grow with me and help me grow. You know, sex was never meant to confuse me or break me. It's there to display, you know, God's beauty. Um, and yeah, and this book really affirms my value as a person, regardless of the type of past that I've had. And so that's what I mean by saying that I hope that we can have these conversations earlier, more honestly, more, you know, more and with more honesty and with more grace, so that young girls and young boys are not just living to survive something that they faced in the past, but we are truly living, and just, you know, taking each day by the horns, so to speak, and living fully, because we know that we're loved, we know that we're valued, we know that it wasn't our fault, and we know that sex is beautiful, and we have an understanding of I'm not alone. There's a whole community of people who are willing to walk with me and journey with me. Yeah, so those would be my closing comments.
Beautiful. Yeah, and that's my passion, is to get on the front foot on these topics. You know, we equip our kids for their careers, we equip them spiritually and who they're going to follow, but we fail to equip with relationships so often, and it's the porn industry and so much online stuff that's equipping them. So let's thank you for being a part of a solution here. As Anne said, it's not the solution, but it's, you know, something which is better than nothing. And let's have these conversations. Now, there's limited books that are for sale at Bucker Books in Suva currently. But come November, hopefully we'll have thousands of these that we can give out for free to young people once I've ridden across America and raised a bunch of money. We can print off, yeah, the aim is to print off 10,000 and distribute them through churches and schools and whoever wants them. So thank you, Anne and Libby. It's been awesome to talk to you.
Thank
and
you.
hopefully I'll see you again soon, sometime, someplace. Bye.